Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. Very straightforward. How have you cheated death? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I got in an accident with a drunk driver. Everyone that saw the car afterwards said the same thing. How are you alive? The roof where I was sitting was damn near touching the seat. I couldn't have fit back in there if I tried. I got pretty effed up for sure, but thankfully I didn't die. I had a screening for something else, and my doctor found very early stage cancer at age 34. It was removed painlessly and completely in an afternoon. It's a cancer that usually affects people over 60, doesn't have symptoms until it's too late. If I didn't have this other screening, I likely would have died a painful death from it in 10-ish years. When the doctor first called to give me the results, he said it was divine intervention, and never gave me the results of the test I came in for. When I was still a fetus, my mother suffered a heavy injury to her stomach, causing the death of my twin, but I survived somehow. The doctors basically told her she must stay bedridden for the rest of the pregnancy, or else she would lose me too. So my grandma got her an SNES, and she just played video games all day. I still have that Super Nintendo. In 1977, while I was rushing to catch a bus, a man stopped me for a change of $1 to use a payphone. I gave him change, missed my bus, and minutes later, it was in a horrible highway accident. Don't know if I can say I cheated death as much as had an amazing medical team that knew what they were doing. But when I was 19, I was diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma. It was on my stomach in ulcers that equaled up to 5 pounds worth of tumors. I was told on Tuesday, when they were trying to figure out what specific type I had so they could know how to treat it, that it didn't start a treatment plan by Friday, it would be too far gone to save me. Cut to Friday morning, and they basically flipped a coin and went with Burkitt's lymphoma. Luckily, they were right, because it had been nearly 20 years since my last round of chemo, and I'm still cancer-free. Had they been wrong, I wouldn't be here typing this. Congenital heart defect, WPW, completely unknown until 35 years old. I was playing board games with a small group. Vision narrowed until I came to looking up at EMTs. They had taken turns doing CPR for 14 minutes until medical arrived and shocked me 3 times to bring me back. 1 surgery and defib install later, and everything is pretty much normal with cheap med. Had I been driving or at home alone, that would have been it. Those 4 guys don't pay for beers ever when we go out. I was hit by a drunk driver while I was riding my bike at 13. If I hadn't been wearing my helmet, I would have died. The helmet was cracked all the way through on the back. Safety equipment has never been a joke to me since, and all of my nieces or nephews need to do is call me saying they need a new helmet, and they'll have one. I was in a brutal car accident. My son was 5 at the time in the back seat. Our vehicle was hit 3 times like a ping pong ball during rush hour, pushed over 3 lanes into oncoming traffic. When we finally stopped, we had narrowly evaded being sandwiched between 2 transport trucks. My right arm was crushed and is now all titanium, but otherwise we made it out alive. My son without a scratch, thanks to a properly installed car seat. Hours later, I went into another portal, hopped up on a cocktail of ketamine, morphine, etc. I'm convinced I entered the edge of life or death, as it was a surreal experience. I unknowingly had a UTI. Never really had one before, but I was always told the symptoms were things like dark urine, pissing blood, being itchy. I had none of them. I was trying to tough guy it out, but I had pain in my stomach for at least 5 days, and I decided to go to urgent care because I couldn't eat or walk anymore. They thought my appendix had effing blown, so they sent me to the ER, but it was a UTI, about 24 hours away from going septic and infecting other organs. I felt pretty effing stupid, but at the same time I had no symptoms other than pain. Shit's scary. Was supposed to be the passenger in my mom's little car when it was T-boned and that side flattened. Ran directly off a cliff the night in a snowstorm, flipped in the air while falling and landed 25 feet below in deep, soft snow face up, head point down slope, not knowing what happened. The forgotten timer set on my phone for a COVID test went off in my pocket as I was about to make a turn. The sound so startled me that I slammed on the brakes just as a large truck ran the light and cut through my lane where it would have hit me head on. My bio father punched my mom in the stomach 9 weeks before I was due. A few days later, she was feeling just a little off and called her doctor, who told her to go to the hospital. It turns out the placenta had ruptured, and the surgeon said we both would have died that day had she just decided to sleep it off instead. One very emergency C-section later, and we both made it, if not a little undercooked. In 2019, I had an ex-boyfriend hire a hitman to kill me. He emptied his entire clip out on me, and I was shot once behind my back, and it punctured my lung. I was rushed to the ER. I was set on a table while the nurses and doctors tried to revive me. I remember at one point everything stopped hurting, and I was just feeling really at peace and slowly drifting off. They kept putting warm blankets on me because my body was getting cold, but I wasn't cold. My body was simply shutting off. When they realized that one of the doctors stabbed me with a giant needle, and that shit hurt so much, I started feeling all the pain from the shooting again. A couple more minutes and I would have been completely gone. Survived a bear attack. Survived being lost at sea for 4 days on a fishing boat. Ran out of gas, no land in sight. Walked away from falling out of a 2-story window when I was like 4 or 5. Walked away from crashing my motorcycle into a guardrail. Walked away from my friend's 300ZX TT crashing through trees and splitting in half. I think that's about it. Not sure if this counts, but many years ago I was riding home from our local dirt jumps on my BMX. Behind my house is a quarry, which has a really rocky bridleway running down the hill. This is the route I would usually take to get home from the jumps. Anyway, I was heading home while the sun was setting and was absolutely blasting it down this rocky path. I jumped off one of the rocks, and while I was in the air, I watched my front wheel drop out from my forks, and before I knew it, they had pummeled straight into the ground, sending me straight over the handlebars. I flew a good 20 to 30 feet and landed on a big rock right on my spine. I wasn't wearing a helmet at the time, but fortunately I was wearing my backpack, which cushioned my landing. I walked away in shock, but completely unscathed apart from a small graze on my knuckles. I've never felt so lucky to be wearing a backpack in my life. Without it, I'd certainly have been paralyzed or worse. Yeah, sure, that counts. I mean, it could have resulted in a much worse outcome. So, yeah, I'm glad you're wearing a backpack. Sure, you are too. I was riding a motorbike at 60 miles per hour, national speed limit road. An oncoming car overtook a car in a blind bend and forced me off the road. The moment my bike hit the grass, I decided to jump off it, as I was heading for a stone wall and knew that I would never be able to get control of the bike once it was off a tarmac road. The bike pummeled into the wall, and I hit the floor with force. My leathers and helmet saved me from a much worse fate, but I think if I'd have hit the oncoming car or the wall, I'd have been stuck dead instantly. I was on my way to stay with friends, and my aerosol deodorant exploded in my rucksack, and my visor completely detached from my helmet. I was a C-17 Loadmaster, and back in 2003, we flew a mission out of Baghdad, and our plane got hit by an SA-14 at about 1,200 feet. I just happened to be sitting behind the pilot in the left ACM seat, and I got to stare at a giant blowtorch erupting out of the top of our number 2 engine and flowing over the wing, where the fuel tanks were full. I fully expected the wing to explode any second until we were on the ground and the fire trucks were spraying us down. Congenital heart failure. I was a competitive swimmer growing up and misdiagnosed by many doctors for many years. I was 2 months away from my mitral valve completely closing and suffering from complete heart failure by age 9. Luckily, a cardiologist found it after a last-ditch effort to try to figure out what was going on and passing out in my last pool. Scheduled for a rush surgery, had mitral valve replaced, am alive. Thankful for cardiologists. Get your heart checked. One time in high school, I was walking home through an area of the city that was largely populated by another group of young adolescents. As I was walking down the street, I noticed a car at the top of the street. I walked past it without really looking into the car, but I did notice a lot of smoke coming out of it. There may have been 3 or 4 people in it. I got maybe 5 or 6 car lengths away and had an overwhelming feeling in my stomach that something bad was going to happen. I crossed the street, and had a row of parked cars on the left of me, with the car that was parked further up the street behind me on the opposite side. For whatever reason, something in me told me to drop to the ground. At that very moment, I heard tires screeching from behind me, and I threw myself down just as bullets were sprayed over the top of me. Glass from a few cars rained down on top of me. I was near the end of the street. The car turned right at the end of the street, looking down the sidewalk. I looked up at the vehicle and could see that their bullets had been missed. I turned and ran toward the first house, which happened to have the tenant open to see what was going on. I pushed past them, ran through their house, through their back door, hopped their fence, and up their neighbor's fence. I ran to the next street. The car had turned and followed me. I continued running between the neighborhood deeper into this opposing group's territory. I realized I was further and further from my destination and in a very bad predicament, running out of houses to run through. I hid for a bit in the dark, listening to cars driving around, scared that every car was them. I noticed I was on a street with a girl that I'd only hung out with maybe once or twice. I came to her house and knocked on the door. She happened to be awake, and she offered me to come inside. I didn't tell her about what had just occurred, just that I was happy to see her and asked if I was welcome to stay the night. I was on a mountain trail in South Dakota. I'm not sure if we took a wrong turn or the trail just ended, but along a mountainside the rope just ended, and the next bit was very sloped and covered in fine gravel. 12-year-old me clambered across, but barely, and my parents asked me to come back. Only later did I realize that the drop was many tens of feet, and a slip was very likely. This is not a climactic or crazy story, but the slow, creeping reality of death haunts me whenever I think of it. During 2002, on the day my mother went into labor and went to the nearest government medical college. Now, government medical colleges mean free treatment, but it also means the worst patient care there is. Dirty lobbies, dirty beds, inhuman toilets, nurses treat you like animals, etc. Anyway, my mom went into labor, and she was admitted shortly afterwards. She had her checkup and ultrasound. There was another woman in her ward who also went into labor that day, and that woman's child didn't make it. She gave birth to a deceased baby. Anyway, this stupid effing nurses, and I know you all have huge respect for nurses, but I can't help it, then told my family that my mom has a dead baby inside her, and they need to remove it. My dad was asked to buy an injection required for the process. That injection would have killed me. When my grandma arrived at the hospital, and she got told that I died, she lost it. She started screaming and saying how even the last night, when she was applying oil on my mom's belly, I was kicking and healthy. Mind you, this is a woman who has given birth to 8 kids, of whom only 3 are alive. She knows what she's talking about. Even then, those nurses were physically fighting her and won't let her into the ward. She fought her way in and went to my mom, who was oblivious to all this and could still feel me kicking, and demanded that the doctor comes and sees me immediately. After that, I was born, at the exact stroke of midnight. Making this up, I was literally born at exactly 12 a.m. This is the gist of how I cheated death. Of course, there is more of this tale of hell, like mom bleeding for hours after I was born, and not even being given some water to drink. Managed to get back into my hometown as it was on fire and managed to rescue 2 dogs. The entirety of the journey through town was navigated by GPS, and feeling the road as it was a total brownout. I did rear end someone, but there was no scratch since it was very low speed. I also almost was in a head-on collision with a fire truck screaming down the road and said total brownout. You would think I have smoke damage to my lungs because I was walking around outside too, trying to recover things. I did lose my house and almost got killed by a falling tree I couldn't see. Missed me by a couple of feet because it fell onto where I was standing 3 seconds prior. I managed to get out unscathed with 2 dogs. Sadly, I could make it out with my 4 cats as they perished in the fire, and their charred bones were found by me and my ex-fiancée the next day. It was sad, but I'm thankful I became a hero for the dogs, as one is still with me today and loves me a lot. Eastland Complex Fire 2022, if you're curious.